Welcome, everyone, to the Happiness Journey with Dr. Dan podcast, where every journey is worth living. My name is Dr. Dan, and I'm your host for today's episode. I'm a bilingual cognitive behavior and neurolinguistic practitioner specializing in anger management issues, both court-appointed and private, marriage and relationship coaching, dissociative disorders, narcissistic personality disorders, depression, anxiety, dream analysis, and also provide life, business, and retirement coaching support. I provide individual one-on-one sessions in both French or English, and also do group settings. If you need any assistance, reach out to DNB Therapy and Coaching Services at 301-325-1550, and our website can be found on lifecoach.drdanpodcast.com. In today's fifth episode of season 37, I'm very excited to welcome Julie Savon, a former corporate law mediator, becoming a psychedelic facilitator and chronic anxiety healer, where she will share her personal journey of discovering what truly creates a sense of security from within, and how psychedelics, nervous system regulation, and integration open new perspective beyond traditional approaches. We're also going to explore the importance of slowing down, trusting your intuition, and creating a life that doesn't just look successful from the outside, but genuinely feels good on the inside. Join us as we uncover the deeper connection between success, self-trust, healing, and authentic freedom. So without further ado, and as with all of our previous episodes, I'll leave it to the guest to properly introduce herself, as no one else can do a better job. Julie, the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here today. Yes, I used to be an attorney, and now I am a certified coach and psychedelic facilitator. My journey to this work was really one of my own healing, because I realized as I became an adult that I had struggled with anxiety, depression, dissociation for a long time, really ever since my dad died when I was a child. And we didn't have conversations about mental health. It was something that I kind of had to figure out and discover on my own. But after trying a lot of the conventional methods, whether that be therapy, prescriptions, other forms of coaching, I just felt like I had been putting in a lot of effort and not really seeing a return on that investment until I started working with psychedelics. And that really shifted everything for me. And now, it's been 5 years, and I have healed my own anxiety and depression. Not that I never have moments of sadness or moments where I feel anxious, but it's not something where if I were to go, to a doctor, that I would get, oh gosh, I'm losing the word, that they would say that I had like generalized anxiety disorder diagnosed, right, with any one of those conditions anymore. And so I really credit that to the work with psychedelics. It's not something that you can just use on its own. It's really something that works well in tandem with other things. It's almost like, I think, the secret weapon for a lot of different things that makes your efforts in other areas finally stick. So that is how I got here, and I'm so excited to speak with you today.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Julie. So let me get a bit of an understanding. I know that psychedelics, are they FDA approved by someone who could actually coach people how to use them? Because I know that I've invited other psychedelic experts, and they said that they have to conduct any retreat outside of the US because some of the psychedelics are not, I would say, recognized.
Yeah, psychedelics is a really interesting landscape right now. I liken it to cannabis. A few years ago, I think psychedelics is going to catch up to cannabis pretty quickly. But for instance, so I'm in Kansas City, Missouri, right? So if I go to a dispensary here, I can buy recreational marijuana. If I were to drive across a literal road into Kansas City, it's just called State Line, right? Kansas City, Kansas, then I'm committing a crime. We look at federal regulation, and it is still illegal federally, but then we look at states like Oregon, California, well, parts of California, Washington, Colorado, Washington, D.C., and psychedelics are legal. You can go into a dispensary, you can buy microdosing capsules. So it is a very interesting landscape right now. I have retreats, like full dose retreats out of the country for reasons that other guests have mentioned. But when it comes to the microdosing in particular, I'm not involved in the supplying, shipping, manufacturing, profiting from those companies. But I do have companies that I recommend that are based in California that ship nationwide. So it is a very interesting landscape still in this world, for sure.
So now, when we look at the different type of psychedelic, like psilocybin, LSD, DMT, and mescaline, and all that,
Yep.
so when we talk about mushroom, that falls under the category of psychedelic, or is it such a micro level that it's not really considered at that point as something that could be considered psychedelics?
Oh, that's a great question. Okay, so mushrooms, if we're talking about psychedelic mushrooms, we are talking about psilocybin. I also think this is maybe where it gets confusing for people, which I totally understand because we also hear about mushroom supplements.
Yes,
And
correct.
if you think about coffee or something like that, mushroom coffee, it's a very
Yes.
popular one. That's, and I'm not going to say 100% of the time because I don't know all the companies, but that's 99% of the time a functional mushroom supplement. So that's a mushroom like lion's mane, cordyceps, reishi, turkey tail. Like it's a great mushroom that provides a benefit, like perhaps decreasing brain fog or increasing your immune system, but it's not a psychedelic mushroom. So when we think about microdosing, which is primarily what my work centers around, is the intentional use of a small amount, a sub-perceptual amount of a substance. It's still a psychedelic substance, but we're taking such a low amount that we're not having the stereotypical side effects of a psychedelic substance, if that makes sense. Like you're not going to see anything that isn't there.
So is when people are being prescribed either for, for cannabis, those who actually have glaucoma and other of illnesses that actually do work. So when it comes to psychedelic, can a doctor prescribe that, or they won't stay away from that completely because they're making more money when they actually prescribe real medication?
I mean, that's definitely like a big, I was just reading a post about this, right? That's a big debate in the field right now. Like we see, you know, Eli Lilly just bought a psilocybin compound. So it's like a man-made psilocybin versus mushrooms. And we think about doctors and prescriptions and the kickbacks and everything from big pharma. So in places where you have centers that have, so I'm thinking specifically, a doctor's not going to prescribe you microdosing, right? But a doctor might be able to direct you to a treatment center where you could have a full dose of a psychedelic, probably LSD or psilocybin, maybe 5-MeO DMT. That's becoming like more widely known and accessible. They might send you in that direction and you might be able to receive a service there, like in Oregon, in Colorado, for example. But when it comes to microdosing, I think a lot of doctors, from my anecdotal experience hearing my clients talk to me, are more open to microdosing, but they can't tell you to go do it. But they're also not saying you shouldn't do it. And for a lot of people, especially people on medications that they want to get off of, like SSRIs, like Adderall, Vyvanse, Strattera, Ritalin, it's a great option for them.
But then if we look at Adderall and Ritalin, which usually are being prescribed for those who have ADHD, and you're not going to put any kid in psychedelic that young. I mean, this is already
No.
affect negatively adults. So even in microdosing, I'm not sure that this is going to be something that would be effective for them to completely wean off from Ritalin or Adderall.
I definitely would never work with children. I've never worked with children, but I have worked with several adults who no longer we want to be on Strattera, Vyvanse, Adderall, and they have successfully and long term gotten off those medications and stayed off them through the intentional structured use of microdosing.
I see. So, what are the long-term, I would say, effect of constantly using psychedelics when it comes to dealing with any mental illnesses?
Oh, I love that you use the word constantly because that's my whole point, that it's not a constant use. It's the opposite of big pharma. It's something where if you do it intentionally, if you integrate, that's the biggest piece. If you integrate with it, you don't have to keep doing it, right? Which is the opposite of most mental health medication. So, for instance, I like to say going through about 3 to 4 rounds of microdosing can increase your overall baseline, your overall homeostasis to a point where you're at a number like day to day that you really like. So maybe you're an 8 out of 10 normally, or a 7 out of 10, right? Coming up from a 3 or a 4 out of 10 before. And if you have integrated, you can sustain those results for 6 months to a year. The post that I was reading just earlier today was talking about clinical trials of a full dose of psilocybin for the treatment of anxiety and depression, and that 67% of participants still had positive outcomes a year later, not having received additional treatments.
So, what are the side effects that people should expect if it's not monitored? Can people just go and read through how much like the microdosing is it? Does it go with pound of body weight? I mean, if someone is like 150 pounds, could they get a smaller amount than those who are 200 pounds to be able to have the same effect?
Yeah, dosing is a very common question. One of the reasons people come and work with someone who's done this, right, for quite a few years, because these are things that you could spend a lot of time researching, or you could work with someone who knows. I would say in general, dosage is actually looking at different factors other than body weight. So, for instance, A lot of people microdose with 100 milligrams, which is like 1/10 of a gram. I microdose today. Actually, microdose before this podcast. I have been microdosing on and off. Obviously, I don't microdose all the time, but I'm sometimes take myself through protocol specifically because this is my work. This is what I do. But I still microdose with 100 milligrams for people who have longer term SSRI use because serotonin and psilocybin both bind at the 5-HT2A receptor site in your brain. Sometimes that can be like a little bit of over exertion with those receptors, and sometimes 200 milligrams work better for people with those long-term SSRI use. 300 milligrams is really where I would stop calling it a microdose and where I would posit that you're gonna feel it more, right? Maybe some experience some of those more typical psychedelic effects. And so over that, I would not recommend people use that amount. But that is when body weight sort of comes into a factor. So for instance, I was working with bought like a he would go to body weight shows. Oh my gosh, I can't think of what the word is.
Bodybuilders, yes.
But he was huge, right? He was jacked. And so he did take 300 milligrams. But body weight doesn't matter as much until you get to those levels as something like a long-term SSRI use would.
I see. And okay, so when it comes to because I know that when I invited other guests that talks about psychedelic and seeing, I mean, when they're in or using it on the retreat, they
Mhm.
it can actually have negative outcome. I mean, they could fall like really into kind of like a withdrawal effect, and they could really feel kind of like, okay, what's going on with me? Is it because of them not being taking the right dosage, or they took too much at once, or what are the possible side effects?
Yeah, so I don't want to speak on something where like I didn't listen to the interview. I don't know exactly what happened, but I'm just going off of what you're describing when I say I think a lot of people don't properly vet who is a good candidate for this and who isn't. For instance, I wouldn't work with someone who has either been diagnosed with or has a close family history of bipolar 1, so that mania, or schizophrenia. I make sure that my retreat participants, and we're looking at full dose, this is more likely to be an outcome of a full dose versus a microdose if not properly administered. Um, I would make sure that they're a good candidate. I also don't believe that more is more better. And I know other people disagree. Other people want to take like 5 grams and have this quote unquote ego death and this like stereotypical whatever experience you're chasing. You can have a very powerful experience at 2 grams, at 3 grams. But I also think I know that set and setting, this is something that the research substantiates, is a very important they're very important things to control for, and I take great care in how I set up my retreats for set and setting. I also keep my retreats small. There are 5 to 6 women, women only, and I'm not trying to be at scale out here. I know there's a very popular retreat in Costa Rica where people can go take ayahuasca, and it's like 60 to 70 people in a room. So
Right.
there's a lot of care for me and a lot of consideration when I enter into the retreat space and who is entering with me.
So compared to the psilocybin, LSD, DMT, and mescaline, is there one specific that would be better than the other, or they would recommend depending on what the person tried to experience?
Okay, well, a couple ways to answer that. One, I feel like every psychedelic is sort of in a family tree, right? And I don't claim to be an expert on things that I don't facilitate. I work with psilocybin, I work with LSD. Psilocybin to me, in various cultures, right? We call them like Los Niños Santos, the little children. Like it's a lighter energy, and it's a really good entry point to me in my mind to this world. Whereas ayahuasca, people more traditionally refer to her as the grandmother. And when we think about a grandmother, I almost think about the stereotypical like grandmother Willow and Pocahontas. She's stern, she's kind of no nonsense. And that is a very different experience. I've sat with ayahuasca, I've sat with LSD, I've sat with psilocybin, and everything has a different energy. And so I think part of it's comfortability level. Where do you feel comfortable entering? I also think this sounds a little bit woo, but what do you feel called to do, right? I think some people think, oh, I should do ayahuasca because you see it in a very popularized way on TikTok or whatever, but is that like a genuine desire for you? Is that something you've just been like subliminally fed, right? Versus some people like, no, I've always felt like I wanted to have an experience with psilocybin. And I'm like, that's beautiful. Like let's go do that. But I do think it really depends on what you're called to. And then for instance, one big one that has a big differentiator is ibogaine. Ibogaine is not for everyone. Ibogaine is traditionally used with PTSD, really intense PTSD, as well as like heroin addiction. It's a very long experience. It is something that you must have medical supervision around. And I have absolutely, even though I'm in this work, I have absolutely no interest to sit with Ibogaine. I probably never will. So it really does depend. Yes.
So, now I'm sure that some listeners are asking, can this be addictive? Can we fall
Oh,
into an addiction and feel that because we've experienced something that allow us to weed off SSRIs and feel more, I would say, especially if you're dealing with bipolar one or like ADHD, whatever it is, when you feel that you don't need those SSRIs, you feel like, okay, that's gonna last in my system for what, 6 months to a year, you said, and then
mhm.
after that, would you need to go back and use it again? Or would you have to go back to SSRIs to be able to manage your symptoms of mental illness?
Okay, a few different questions I felt like in there, so I'm going to try to put up my fingers and remember them all. But if you feel I did not answer something, please go ahead and refresh my memory. When it comes to addiction, let's just start there, right? Psychedelics are actually treatments for addiction. That's a very common misconception. There is no propensity for addiction. And if you look at studies, rats, when administered different substances, whether it be nicotine, cocaine, heroin, psychedelics, so psilocybin, LSD, rats will return to all the other levers, and they'll keep pressing for more cocaine, more nicotine, but they will not keep pressing for more psilocybin and more LSD. I know from an anecdotal perspective, in my own experience, even though this is my work, I have a hard time wanting to go back because it can be an intense experience. And there's just like, man, am I really, do I want to do this right now and, open myself up in that way? Not because it's scary or it's bad, but it is just, it's almost like a biological response of, I can feel it in my body, the hesitancy to want to go there again. But again, it's my work. If it wasn't my work, would I do it as often as I do? Which honestly isn't. I do microdose, but I'll say like maybe I go on 3 to 4 whole journeys in a year.
Mhm.
So no, there's no propensity for addiction. And for someone who has gotten off, for instance, SSRIs, that 6 months to a year, I always recommend people do another microdosing protocol, for instance, or another journey once a year, just as maintenance. And if you're feeling like, oh, maybe I'm not at that baseline anymore, I'm no longer at the 7 or an 8, then going through a few consecutive protocols, a month of microdosing on a schedule, taking a 2 week break, and then another month, just to help you increase your baseline. But no, it's not something where it's something that you can do for maintenance, certainly. Oh gosh, did I answer all parts of your question or
Yes.
am I leaving
So
something
the
out?
third one is, do you feel that this is something that after people microdose with psychedelics, do
Mhm.
they can they completely no longer use SSRIs?
Oh, yes. Okay. So that is something that I work with a lot of clients on to get off of SSRIs, to get off of Adderall, Vyvanse, Strattera. And the thing that's different about me than a doctor's approach, and look, I've worked with over 50 people for this specifically, and I say talk to your doctor, be honest with them. I've never, encouraging someone to be subversive about it, but a doctor will always give them a plan. I don't care if that person's taking 20 milligrams or 100 milligrams. And this is what the doctor's plan says. Okay, every single week you're going to go down and you're going to have your dose and have your dose and have your dose. You'll be off in about a month. Just keep having it for a week. That doesn't work. I am all about being slow. I'm being a sustainable. I go in low increments. And I tell people you have to be honest. So right now I'm working with someone who's getting off of Prozac. She started at 80 milligrams. We went down originally to 70. Right now, she's down to 60. It's been almost a month, so she's only down to 60 milligrams. But I talked to her and I asked her, how are you feeling? A very common experience is brain zaps. That can be described almost like a lightning bolt in your head or a very intense small headache. She has yet to experience a brain zap. So that's great. That's a good sign, right? That her body is, learning to work with this new level. She has not had any mood, irritability, or instability. I always tell people though, like there's no shame in staying at whatever level you're on, and I would rather your body reached an equilibrium with that level before we went down than we go down too fast and then you feel like you need to go back up and we're doing this like wishy-washy all over the place thing. So no, people can get off and stay off when they do it like that. When you're trying to just either cold turkey, which I would never recommend, I don't think a doctor would recommend either, but when you go too fast, that's when people get off for a month and then go back on.
I see. So and that's something that I want to know as well. It like just cannabis or marijuana, does it give you the munchies? Or
No.
okay, I just want to, or does it curb your appetite? Or it has nothing to do with leptin or ghrelin?
You know what's really interesting is this is more anecdotal. I don't think there's any good research study about that, but I've had a lot of clients who said that, well, actually, there is a lot of research about substances, right? So a lot of people have used microdosing to curb their drinking. And that has worked super well, both anecdotally and clients. You see a lot of that in the research as well, for people with like diagnosed alcoholism. But a lot of my clients report like decreasing. I don't want to call them bad. I don't want to shame anyone's behavior, right? But whether that be chewing like nicotine pouches or smoking cigarettes or just eating like, less nourishing, less whole foods. And it's become easier for them to stop chewing gum, choose the whole food, choose to not have a nicotine pouch. So it's really interesting how it can change behaviors, and lead us toward ultimately healthier decisions.
So do you think that eventually, if the FDA sees more and more positive result with psychedelics, do you think that eventually they can legalize all that in every single state across the country, or do they still? It's all about money. It's all about the big pharma saying to the government, no, 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 you cannot allow that because then that will completely replace people from taking the medication that we make billions on.
You kind of were reading my mind. I think that's a big concern that I have, right? Like ultimately, I do think the government is a business, unfortunately. And we look at politicians and all the money they make versus their salaries, and it's like, where did this money come
Yeah.
from, right? So
Yeah.
that's a concern for me, certainly. A concern for me is recent legislation in Texas, where, my God, you can have a gun and you can drink as much alcohol as you want, but if you have any weed on you, now you have a 2-year prison sentence, which to me is just absolutely asinine.
Yes.
When we look at the effects of gun violence, when we look at the long-term, well, alcohol is a known carcinogen, right? But we're fine with people doing that, and people drink and drive, and all sorts of things. I could go on a whole tangent. But I also think at a deeper, even more pessimistic level, psychedelics really do heal. Psychedelics have opened my mind in a lot of ways. When we look at MK Ultra, which is a declassified CIA experiment, when the CIA was dosing people unknowingly in San Francisco with acid, with LSD in the 60s, and instead of becoming this truth serum, this biological agent of war that the CIA had posited it was, people instead started to question the government, started to question our interactions with and participation in foreign affairs like Vietnam, like Korea. We see that it just opens up people's minds. And again, not to be too woo out there, but I do think it's something that makes us question the truth that we're fed. And the government would rather have us be docile than have us be questioning.
Mhm. Well, I mean, of course, it's if we all awakened, then we become a threat to the government. They just
Exactly.
keep us completely asleep, and that's how they work. So when it comes, because we're gonna soon approach the end of this podcast. I know it's we have so much more to talk about. So when it comes to you personally,
Mhm.
going from a corporate lawyer to deciding to do this, and I know you've tested it yourself, you've seen it worked, etc. Does it really help those who are dealing with stress disorder or severe other mental illness that they can eventually find not a cure necessarily, but more of medication management?
Yeah, I'd like to leave you with a story. I had a client one time who came to me, and we met in a program where we were both learning how to work our CRM. We were both online business owners. And I met this woman, and she's like, "Oh, I've always wanted to microdose." And we started working together. And she had such a great affect. She was happy. I always liked hearing her comments or her questions. I was excited to work with her. And so we worked together for a while. She really enjoyed microdosing. She saw great results. She even went to one of my retreats. And when I stop working with someone, I always give them an exit interview, right? And I ask a few standard questions. And so I'm asking her questions. I'm just typing away on my computer. And I say, okay, before we started working together, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being absolutely terrible, 10 being I feel the best I could possibly feel, how did you feel on average day to day in your life? And she looked at me via Zoom and she said, well, can I say 0? And I was so taken aback. And I said, "Well, you can, but I didn't know that's how you felt." And she shared with me at that time, which is months later, that she was contemplating ending her own life. She had never said this to me before. She had never said that she had suicidal ideation. I actually knew that she had lost her father. He had died by suicide, and she had two young boys. And in the moment, I like didn't, I didn't really know what to say. I had no words, and I was so shocked because, like so many people we hear about who do end up taking their own lives, they present fine, they look fine to an outsider, but inside they're not feeling that way. And she goes, "Well, now I feel like a 7 or an 8. I feel really good. I feel better as a mom. I'm more confident as a mom. I'm not screaming at my kids. I feel like I can actually manage them and take them by myself. I feel closer to my husband. I feel better in my life." And that to me, it's like, anyone can say anything they want to me about psychedelics, but that's two boys who still have their mom. That's a person who's still alive. And that is why I continue to do the work that I do, because those are the changes that I see.
So when it comes to your retreat, and you said that you only deal with women that comes there. So
Yeah.
how much of a, like I would say, assessment do you do with each and every of your potential client?
Yeah.
Like a 1 week, 2 week assessment to determine if they could be a good candidate, or is it something that you have to ask them for their past medical history? I mean, because you want to make sure that there's no, like when they take this, it will not counter effect any medication that they're in, and that's something that's very, very important because or else it's going to be a shit show.
Yeah, that's a great question. So right off the bat for my retreats, there's no like quote unquote link to buy. I do have retreats, but there's no way for someone to sign up for a retreat basically until that we do have this assessment. So one thing that we look at is definitely contraindication. I have an amazing tool that I didn't build. I'm so grateful for the person who built it. But that looks at contraindications between medications. So yes, history, personal history, family history, and then honestly, a big part of it is no one can sign up for my retreat unless I actually know you. We've worked together in some other way, or I know you in a real life context, or we have to get on a call like this and have a real conversation, because there's a lot you can tell about someone's affect, etc. So if someone's not willing to do those things, then I already know they're not a good fit for a retreat.
And the retreat is like just like a 3 day thing, or is it or they can choose if they want there only 1 day, if it's and is it out of the country or is it inside the US?
That's a great question. I have a few retreats that are in the US in states where I can, and those are 4 days. I have a few international retreats, and those are 6 days. And no, once you have come, you are coming and you're saying the whole time. And that's a thing people have to sign too, where it's like, I'm not going to drive and I'm not going to shalala. So no, once you're here, you're here.
Okay, okay. And during that retreat, you said like, are they for the 6 days, if it's international retreat, are they 6 days using psychedelics, or they combine a lot of the other like sessions or a lot of informational session, a lot of activities? I mean, how does that work?
Yep, a mix of other modalities, right? So I'm a breathwork facilitator as well. Other modalities we look at like visualization, meditation. International retreats have two full doses, one psilocybin, one LSD, whereas domestic retreats only have the one with psilocybin. And there's also like I think fun is a very powerful teacher. I think we really focus on like learning through pain, but I'm a big fan of learning through pleasure. And so at every retreat there's fun to be had, whether we're renting a boat or we're getting jet skis. Obviously not when you're on anything, right? This is when you're fully off.
Yes.
But yeah, plus a huge focus on integration. My whole thing is people aren't integrating, whether it's therapy or coaching or anything else. So we have a whole half day of integration exercises. Plus, we have a whole month of support after the retreat for specifically the integration of everything that came up on it. So it's 3 more calls and support for me in real time.
So how can people sign up? I mean, we're about to just conclude this podcast. So how can people find you and know exactly where you are going to, what is your next place for them to, to sign up for?
Yeah, so you can find me at Julie Savone, JulieCyvonne, on Instagram. I answer all of my own DMs. You can find my website, juliesavone.com. And from there, there's a whole page about retreats where you can apply. If you're interested more in learning about psychedelics, I have a great podcast I do called The Inner Trip that's all about psychedelics, right? My use, I bring on clients' use or other people who've had psychedelic experiences. It's called the Inner Trip 365 Days with Plant Medicine. Or if you're interested in microdosing, I have a free quiz, should I microdose.net. You can go check it out and yeah, see if that is something that is a good fit for you.
So is there like a specific date that you have those retreat? Is it like March, July, September, and then December or something? Or
So I have them like every other month. So we'll be in September and then November. And then I think I'm skipping January this year in 2027. I'm going to launch all of my 2027 retreats in October. So if, people have listened to this by then and want to come check out, I'll be launching retreats. But next year, I believe I'll be doing them in March, May, July, September, November, and then New Year's Eve in 2027, 2028.
beautiful. Well, Judy, that is all the time that we have for today's podcast. And again, thank you sincerely for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us. And we all truly appreciate your participation to this episode when we explore the deeper meaning of success and why achieving more on the outside doesn't always create safety, fulfillment, or peace on the inside. We also covered valuable insight into the nervous system, regulation, psychedelics, integration, and the importance of slowing down enough to hear our intuition. Also, to our millions of listeners out there, we hope that you've enjoyed today's last episode as much as we did. And also, we're very excited for what's ahead of season 37 of the Happiness Journey with Dr. Dan podcast, featuring a lineup of incredible guests with powerful stories that will continue to uplift and inspire all of you. Now, here are some concluding words of wisdom. Healing and transformation are not always about finding something outside of yourself. They're often about reconnecting with what already exists within you. Psychedelics may open doors to new perspectives, but lasting changes come through integration, self-awareness, and intentional action. Learning to regulate your nervous system can help you feel safe enough to slow down and truly listen to yourself. Success means little in your inner world that is constantly overwhelmed. Trust your intuition, honor your experiences, and give yourself permission to evolve. The goal isn't simply to create a life that looks good. It is to create one that feels good, feels authentic, and feels like yours. My name is Dr. Dan Amzallag, and you may all keep pursuing your amazing journey in life. Stay tuned for our next episode.